So thank you for everybody to come to the privacy talk. Today, I'm so glad to have a very great speakers from UK. She's a very human. She's very passionate of education tech space, and I respect her work, and it's remarkable. So, Barry, thank you for coming to this interview opportunity.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's just jump into today's agenda. I would like to explore your great challenges this moment. So you are running your own organization, EDDS. So could you tell us about your work and what is the EDDS?
Yeah, absolutely. So education data digital safeguards, or EDDS for short, is I was just laughing. Apologies for that, but yeah, sometimes I just wonder whether the name is not, creative at all. But it serves a purpose and it's self-explanatory. It is a project that sprouted from an organization, a geopolitical organization called Etoile Partners. It's based in the UK and Brussels in Belgium, but works on various projects, including education and globally. So EDDS began as a project from Etoile Partners. And the objective was to put in place, first to research and to assess the environment around governing EdTech and the growing collection of data from children in the classrooms. The focus is specifically on K-12 education. So this is compulsory education. And we've been working primarily in the global north, but also we collaborate with various organizations from the low-income countries and looking at the global south. I don't really like this kind of separation, but this is just for the wider audience. Quick words, I guess. EDDS, in essence, is it's a collaborative entity with different researchers and other organizations, both in the UK, EU, and internationally. Truly global initiative where we've put together various what we call verticals, various frameworks and criteria according to which across which we wish to assess, evaluate, and kind of hold accountable EdTech, advancing digital technologies, and the organization. So also the businesses behind these technologies that entering the classroom. We are so we our methodology is quite is scientific in essence. So we have an external college of reviewers who are experts from these different verticals. And just a word about the verticals. So we're looking at ethical criteria, cybersecurity, data responsibility, data privacy. We're looking at equity from human rights perspectives, how the technologies and how the data is being used. We're looking at algorithmic fairness, duty of care towards students and teachers, and so on. So along with these different criterias as a point of reference, as a point against which we assess and evaluate EdTech products, we also have a college of reviewers. These are external experts coming from these different fields of the criteria that I just mentioned. And so they are acting as the external peer reviewers, evaluators, and kind of verifying, providing the external verification of the audits and assessment. And as part of this methodology, there's the the aim is to systematize that, but also in a reiterative format whereby we also integrate the whole evaluation system with kind of going back into the starting point. So there is again back at the drawing board, back at discussing through seminars, workshops, interviews, and research with again different stakeholders to identify what new needs to be updated across these different evaluative criteria, and kind of make sure that this evaluative framework is dynamic yeah, and goes in pace with the fast developing technologies.
That's a very impressive. Then I think that you had a very interesting background to support to come to the educational space. So why did you start to work in the educational field? And could you share your own background?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in media communication. So this has been over 20 years that I first started looking at how children engage with digital technologies and formal and informal learning environments. I have also worked in industry in the private sector. So there is an experience from outside of academia, which I think it's very valuable, so you can see different worlds and the different priorities that lie in these different worlds and compare. And so I did have experience also with marketing and again within the field of children and young people. And the marketing instruments, as it were, can be very, very powerful, right? These are instruments of persuasion, communication, and ultimately combining those with children that are a unique segment of society and their unique understanding of of the world around them and how they develop and so on. These two things can be kind of very powerful in terms of how influential marketing can be over children. So really special safeguards need to be put in place. At the same time, we also want to ensure that children are, empowered enough to learn through resilience and through self-discovery and so on. But I wanted to move away from the marketing and media field precisely because I just I didn't want to associate myself with this kind of deploying instruments for manipulating consumerism and manipulating. Not manipulating, that's a powerful word to use, but to really drive this consumerist culture. This was very influential on me when I clearly just wanted to move away from that. And so the research path took me towards education, towards seeing, how education institutions work and how digital technologies are incorporated into the educational space. I've since done research with children and young people since probably around 2009. And that's the time when I also became a mom. And again, it was quite a revelatory experience to see how children learn. And I just want to give a very quick anecdote. I was queuing with my youngest child. He was about 2, so he was, a tiny little toddler. And we were queuing, and there was a huge crowd, and he was becoming very restless. And suddenly I just realized that if I bend next to him just a level with what he's seeing, all you could see is just, imagine what a toddler really sees in a crowd full of adults. And from there, it just dawned on me that, children see in a different way, children experience in a different way. And obviously, there's so much literature into that, but that's where I really took a deep dive. And from there on, I've done lots of research, sat in classrooms, spoken with children, created workshops just to see their imagination, just to see how they think. And especially in formal learning environments in the classroom, you can see how, often children want to express themselves, but they're not expressing themselves the way they're expected to, or the way the measurement is saying that they have to express themselves. And that sometimes their own expression, their own ideas and creativity seems to not count. And to me, that was a big starting point of how can we take that, because that's their agency, that's who they are. They have every right to express themselves the way they see at that point in time. But something else entirely different was happening when I thought about, trying to capture that kind of voice that they have that is not always heard. That's the moment when I saw that, it was probably around 2014, 2015, when I realized that the potential, the technologies in the classroom are always this double-edged sword. So suddenly this information can become really kind of hyper visible, and it's not always, the best way, because suddenly we've got all this granular information of every move, every action, every thought, every intention, or every very, keystroke of whatever can be converted as powerful data. And suddenly we've arrived into a classroom where every single thing that a child does or even intends to do is likely to be converted into data. And at some point, I just, ask this question, is the best way against this monitoring / surveillance, the right to remain silent, which really clashes with my original understanding of, wow, children, see things, and it's such an exciting way, the way they see things. And we want to hear this voice that they have, but at the same time, now we've got enabled this machine of data gathering about every single thing. So we're in a position where I, as a researcher, as a parent, as a as an advocate of children's rights and these same voices, we need to strike a balance and say, when this data collection and data capture for, profiling, inferential decision making or whatever is just too much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, absolutely. Then the children's privacy is becoming so serious at this moment due to the tech influences of educational space. I think you also involved in researcher space as well. So at the university, so what do you research in mostly? Then could you share about your research field?
So my current research is focused on three things. So I'm well, not current, but for the past, I'd say for the past 5-6 years, I've been focusing on three things mainly. So the first thing is I focus on creating this solid, independent system of assessing, of auditing edtechs. And so edtech products, digital technologies, advancing algorithmic systems that are continuously, capturing granular data from children, from the learning and teaching processes on a daily basis, systems that enable this kind of inferencing and predictive analytics and steering decision making based on this data collection. So there, again, back to the idea of the marketing, a lot of the, marketing discourse around edtech and their capabilities and their potential can be seen as it's a bit over, it is a bit of a hype. So there's very little robust research and evidence to say that these products do this, this application does that, or, integrating all these super platforms and mixing them with other applications and making this incredibly advanced digital highway onto which kids just join supposedly to learn and fulfill their best potentials, are just it's just a marketing narrative. So my focus is to really set up something pragmatic, something that speaks with the industry and provides this external verification, validation of where they're really at in terms of their potential and their promise. And the second thing is I work to understand and find ways to help shape policy, if I can say that. So I'm very interested in, how policy is written or how decisions are made at a governmental level from a top-down perspective, and how. So I have the opportunity to meet, and to be part of these different task groups and task forces, working groups, and so on. And I see that the similar discussions, concerns, and challenges are being addressed, which is very good. At the same time, there's so many existing instruments, existing tools and mechanisms that I believe that need to be utilized. So there's a lot more of the existing kind of toolbox that should be optimized, should be used. My concerns with regards to policy, with regards to these top-down decisions, is exporting the capacities and the decision making when it comes to edtech and digital technologies and education into industry. Instead, my focus is to really look at how governments, departments of education can instead kind of continue focusing on growing in-house capacity, intelligence, and an understanding of how these advancing systems are influencing education, and ensure that they safeguard the sovereignty, the independence of public education. And the third focus, so the second is on policy. The third focus I have is on understanding how schools work. So I'm a school governor. I'm a parent trustee of a public high school, and it's been an enormous learning curve. There is a tremendous amount of management and human resources, governance, and goodwill every single day from the moment these school gates are open. So how does a school really work? How do you make sure that I, as a parent, go back and pick up my kids that are safe, that they've learned new things, that they're happy to go there every single day? So there's so much behind the scenes that happens. And I think we need to give a bit more credit and focus again on nurturing, believing, trusting teachers and that whole community that makes sure that education institutions work the way they do. Of course, nothing is ideal, but I think that there is a little bit of rupture with regards to trust, and with regards to understanding. So us on the outside, society, parents, and even ed tech companies, how many of them sit in the classroom or really understand inside out how a school is governed? I don't disregard their other capacities and expertise in things, but that doesn't make us the kind of the omnipotent experts in everything. So that kind of unpacking that I want to do on how schools work is so important, because I see that there is a lot of human work, a lot of goodwill involved, and we need to put that in a better light, and for better understanding for all of the other stakeholders around a school, so that there's a bit more appreciation of what teachers do, what the school leaders do as well. So these are my three kind of lines of research and work.
Yeah, I assume that's especially in the US, has been like a strong stance by the regulators against all the privacy concerns at these times. You mentioned that the gaming industry is the one of the big notices about the breaching of the privacy rights. And maybe just a few years ago, there was some big game name was in the the American regulator is coming to the scrutinies and how it works, and it's called this dark patterns or those kind of infringement is a very big concerns. So as the next questions, I'd like to ask about the edtech and the privacy space. There is a lot of the players is coming to the educational field that due to the COVID or another technical innovation in this space. So what do you think about any concerns with the edtech and the privacy in this moment?
Yeah, I think the issue with edtech and datafication, turning every movement and every action into data for some kind of further assessment, analysis, and influencing decision making, and so on. I think we're way beyond the privacy argument. I think the issue is we've reached a point where we have whole generations that are born in this kind of Truman Show where everyone is being watched, datafied, assessed in some way by the owners behind these advancing data systems. For me, the concern should be how this is going to be used. Are we coming into a point where super platforms, super algorithms will steer populations for which there's no way to know how it happens, why it happens, who does it, who says who should do it, and how to resist that, how to refuse it or to opt out? Or are we going to put guardrails and preserve the autonomy and, as Professor Emeritus Shoshana Zuboff says, the right to future tense? So super platforms and algorithms are ultimately representations of us as humans. They're not better than us. They can only be, as good as we are, but just, kind of update in certain aspects, be a bit more granular, more detailed in terms of what they can find as patterns and predictions and so on. But what I'm trying to say is that they can, they are a representation of who we are. So we're the starting point. Human beings are the starting point. I would choose to work on ourselves first, then let the algorithms decide on our behalf. And that brings us back to the question of education, educational institutions. So what is the purpose of
Thank you. On the different article, you mentioned the PBD, it's privacy by design. It's been contributed to the edtech and privacy issues in some ways. So could you share your thoughts about the privacy by design principle, how this could be integrated in the privacy space in the edtech field?
Privacy by design principles is a way of asking how much of that data is really necessary for teaching and learning to happen. Teaching should still be seen as an art form, and rather than solely focus on the normative understanding of it, good, bad education, excellent education, in terms of outcomes and what can be quantified. What drives the measurement, after all, and therefore the data collection, and therefore the adoption of all these different technologies that promise to capture the data, that promise to make this analysis, that promise to provide these outcomes and measurements and ranking and so on. So I think we should focus on the purpose of education, as I said previously. As education philosopher Gert Biesta says, this is a less straightforward question. So what is the purpose of education? And one that needs to put, teachers, students, agency, creativity, thought, curiosities, and then everything else. So we need to think about the original ingredients first and foremost, and what happens there at the granular level every single day. And then everything else becomes secondary. What data is being collected, how is that data helping enhance, and so on. I don't deny the fact that there is much quality, insight, and value in what the data can say. There is evidence that shows, combining different factors and understanding them with such precisions that data provide. Granted that, but at the same time, we need to say, okay, at what point are we really crossing a boundary here? At what point are we really just focusing on, for the sake of measuring things, and not on those things that cannot even be measured, and yet they still have value? That means we need to be thinking about designing learning and teaching, so for the sake of education, instead of thinking about, how do we design technologies that will ensure privacy. Why are we even talking about spaces where technology is already a given, and it is by default as part of the learning process, digital technologies, that is. So we have come to a point where digital technologies are an inevitable kind of middle, mediator between teaching, learning, between the learner and the teacher, or between, or just for the learner for themselves. Which means that we are now describing a completely different environment that seems to be imposed. So that is not really allowing any kind of choice. Education, learning, and the self-discovery, and all that goes with, learning new things, should not be limited by these technologies. The digital technology should enhance. So in terms of design, I think there's a step before, talking about design, privacy by design technologies, design for the sake of learning, regardless of the technologies.
Yeah, I think the new technology, especially like even the ChatGPT, there is the generative AI that everybody can use it for any new mindset or new discoveries. In this case, a lot of people will be like related to the new technology beyond the edtech. In this case, maybe just like, of course, the edtech company and the school should consider like to keep them in mind, avoid of the risk of the students, the privacy. And also there is the many stakeholders in the classroom, then not just only for the students, but also the teachers, or in the public school, there is the other opportunities to join from outside. So in this case, those stakeholders and what they need to keep them in mind to avoid the risk of the students' privacy, then you have any ideas of that?
I think, what can they do to enhance their privacy? Yeah, this is more of a structural problem, I guess, a matter of, how technologies are adopted, or, in the US context, for example, a lot of these advancing platforms and borderline surveillance tools are mandated. So there is no opt-out for students. That fine. I don't agree with that. I do want to understand how that affects a student's understanding or a child's understanding of privacy. If you know that, or trust, if you know that you're going to space, okay, education is a place where you are being monitored, and you know that there will be a certain level of, coercion and control. There's a form of discipline being imposed, certain values and rules and so on. Of course, the way it is, with many ecologies that the child inhabits. But at the same time, again, have we not gone a bit too far? And what's the understanding of a child's privacy in a place where there will be CCTV cameras, there will be special digital passes every time a student wants to go to the bathroom, or surveys constantly trying to gauge opinions, feelings, emotions from a child, without them knowing how is that information being used. And at some point that child leaves the classroom, how is that information going to be used after they have left that school? And again, what is the understanding of the child with regards to trust? Do they trust these places? There is research that's being done whereby children are, this can be very counterproductive on children's understanding of trust. And you need to consider also the fact that as children grow and develop, they need to develop a form of personhood and character, be autonomous and be trusting in other people, and ensure that other people trust them. And this is what makes us human beings. This is what makes the collective. This is what makes us work and coexist. So what is the long-term impact if that privacy is entirely corroded? I think that these different stakeholders, so the children and parents and teachers, are becoming more aware of what's happening. There is recent research I read about young people's perceptions of data collection, and how that data may be repurposed, or how it may impact them negatively, and so on. And there is already feedback. There is already awareness and understanding. There's already, people are already becoming a bit more aware, but at the same time, there's also the feeling that it's not a life and death experience situation in terms of, that data collection, which on one hand is one of the, biggest problems at the moment, because it is not a life and death moment, but at the same time, we do want to pause and think, how is that going to impact children way into their future? Is that data that's collected today in the classroom going to affect them in some way when they go out and apply for a job, apply for university, and so on? And then on the other hand, as we come to that point, it's going to be too late. So how do we communicate? How do we create further awareness? How do we ensure that children and parents have the option, have the agency to opt out and to say, no, I want to have an alternative, to that system that is now that is in front of me and asking me to take a test or asking me to express my feelings. I want an alternative to that. I want my data to not be used in any way now or ever. So that's the kind of more practical aspect that we need to think in terms of tackling data privacy challenges.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the insights. Through that conversation with you, I figure out that the awareness is very important in a different stakeholders, in a different perception level. That should be the challenges for all of us to protect and safety place for the kids and the students in the classrooms. And yeah, your work your initiative is a very excellent, important work for the future innovation in education space. So in last, I direct to ask you about the message for listeners. I suppose that a lot of the listeners is interested in education, privacy, tech space. So could you share your message to the listeners on this interview?
Yeah, I think as a final message, I think digital technologies should not be seen as subtractive. They should not replace things entirely. We should never come to the point that education, learning, teaching cannot happen if ed tech isn't there. We shouldn't look at it that way.
Thank you for your great message. So it's a very great time to have with you this moment on the interview. And let's keep updating and challenges for education, tech space, privacy protected. Then, yeah, thank you for very having this moment through the interview.
Thank you, Kohei.